Let's shift gears now. When Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi took over office in October, he set a target for himself and the provincial executive to change the lives of those living in townships in less than 18 months. The Premier is also on a mission to scrap Eskom's debt, Soweto's debt to Eskom rather, or look at that situation. This as the embattled power utility struggles to keep the lights on due to billions owed by municipalities. It's these and other promises Lesufi made in October. He joins us now virtually to bring us up to speed with how far his office is in implementing some of these changes. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Premier. We were out and about in Soweto this morning where the community raised serious issues, and top of priority is the ongoing electricity crisis in Soweto. How do you plan on tackling this, considering that Eskom debt from Soweto amounts to 5 billion rand?
Thank you so much, Heidi. Indeed, it's a collective effort. We need to bring all the community members to the negotiating table, and I'm glad that in our interaction with them this morning, there is willingness to go to the negotiating table to resolve long-term outstanding problems. We need to bring Eskom to the table as well, so that we can understand their side of the story. Together with local government, I think the majority of municipalities owe Eskom lots of money, so they also have to be on the table so that we can negotiate with them, and government must join that negotiating table to find an everlasting solution. And from our interaction with our citizens this morning, we need to be realistic as well. The majority of them are unemployed, majority of them are elderly, and majority of them are young people that cannot afford to pay the price of electricity the way it is stated in the municipal bills, and therefore we need to find a way of shielding them or rescuing them. But the reality is, and I'm glad citizens also accepted that there are those that are employed, there are those that run businesses and so on, and there are those that are capable to pay. And those one must be forced to pay so that we don't have to deal with this debt having a revolving door of scrapping a debt and then accumulating it again. And in terms of the future payment of electricity, whether it's through a flat rate, a prepaid, or a normal month-end billing, we need to agree. So I'm of the view that that negotiating table should speedily be set up and speedily resolve all these issues so that we can move on with our lives. And I'm quite convinced we can be in a position to do that if you take the meeting we held this morning with residents as an example of willingness to cooperate and willingness to work together.
So, Premier, perhaps just enlighten us, is there a possibility that you would be able, with your engagements with the President and all stakeholders involved, including Eskom, who will probably be front and centre at this discussion, that you could scrap that 5 billion rand of debt that Soweto owes Eskom? Is there a possibility that that could actually happen?
It's not the scrapping of the Soweto debt alone. You are quite aware that the Minister of Finance, when I was tabling the mini budget, indicated that government has taken over the debt of Eskom, which simply means that government will take over the debt. So if government take over the debt, we must just unpack whether that includes removing the debt that is owed to Eskom by residents, especially those that are in the townships, informal settlement and hostels. The reality is that's where the poor are. The majority of them are unemployed. So if you say must pay that amount of money, how will they pay it? And majority of them are elderly people. Others have already passed on, living in their houses with the young ones that don't even know that particular debt. So we need to concretize how we best resolve that matter. And the best way to resolve that matter is to bring all the stakeholders to the negotiating table and find a mechanism that can eliminate this matter once and for all. But for the development of townships, there's no way that we'll develop our townships when our people are trapped in poverty. There's no way we'll develop our townships when people have this kind of challenges that they're facing. And we need to find an everlasting solution that is acceptable to all people. And I really believe the user pay principle is very strong there. You can't eliminate that user pay principle. Those that can afford to pay must pay, and those that can't afford to pay must be protected. And government must use its coffers to settle the limitations of those that can pay, especially the unemployed and the elderly.
So, Premier, how are you going to go about with this user pay principle? Because there were a number of community members that stood up today while they were engaging with yourself and MECs, and many of them said that they cannot pay, they do not want to pay, whereas others said we don't mind paying a flat rate, and the community almost rejecting the comments from community members who said we don't mind paying a flat rate. There has been an historic culture in Soweto specifically of non-payments, and some saying we will pay, some saying we won't pay. How are you going to handle those two dynamics?
Exactly my point. You can solve it when everyone is on the round table. Is at the round table and making their point here, and we find an everlasting solution to that problem. But the reality is that if the elderly have passed on and they were owing ESCOM, what do you do with that debt? Do you say the generation that came over after their parents have passed on must pay that particular debt? I really feel it will be unfair. And those that are unemployed, on those that are elderly, that are surviving through a social grant. So it's not something that we can answer easily and say must happen in that particular or on this terms or on the way we want it to happen. It must happen after we've engaged in discussion and negotiation with all affected parties. And I was excited today that all parties were there. Government was there, community leaders were there, community members were there, ESCOM was there. And we all agree that let's formulate the best mechanism to resolve this impasse. Because you can't just leave unattended, because we have left it unattended, and that is why we're in the situation that we're in. And I'm of the view that every problem must be resolved and resolved speedily. Because if you leave it unattended, it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger and becomes a monster that you can't manage it. But where we are now, we've confronted it. Community members are prepared to come to the negotiating table. We're in that meeting. No one said we can't talk. No one said we can't tackle this matter. So now that there is willingness to resolve it, let's find a mechanism of resolving it so that we can finally conclude it and proceed with our lives.
Let's just lastly, Premier, speak about the time frame. So you've engaged with communities, you understand what the challenges are when it comes to the electricity crisis in Soweto specifically. What are the time frames that we're looking at here?
It's an ongoing target. It will be very difficult to put a set time frames, but you know, government has processes. Government has time to table the budget, and government has time to analyze its work and take stock of its work. So I'm of the strong view that by the time the Minister of Finance goes to table the budget or his budget speech, by that time, hopefully, we'll have a proper understanding how best to deal with debts that are owed to ESCOM by many townships, not Soweto alone. I think if you're going to confine it to Soweto, it will be missing the point. There are colored communities as well that owes, and there are informal settlements that owes, there are hostels that owes across the country. And we have to find a way of resolving this matter. Folding our arms and say this debt will see to finish will not resolve the problems. But if you confront it, formulate a mechanism or a process, and all parties agree to play their part, I really believe that's the best way to resolve it. We can't just say there's this debt and not speak about it because we think it will vanish or we'll wish it away. Reality, it's stuck with us. Let's find a way. And I really feel to find a way of resolving issues to be realistic. Who is dead, who's no longer in this world, who owed ESCOM? How do we do with that particular, how do we deal with that debt? Who is unemployed? Who's an elderly person that can afford? So that we realistically know how much can we get out of the debt that we have. I'm told by those people that work on these particular figures that of the either 5 billion that is owed around Soweto alone, almost 700 million is collectible. So almost 4 billion is not collectible. So if that amount of money is not collectible, do you want to keep it in our books, or do you want to ignore it, or do you want to formulate mechanism to resolve it so that we can finally conclude on this matter and proceed with our lives? And that's what we are proposing. We don't say we've got the answers. Community are not saying they've got their answers. They say they've got proposal. They say they can afford a prepaid. Others say they can afford a flat rate, and others say they want to pay what they are billed so that they can be in a position to settle the electricity cost. So the combination of all those things will give us a solution that we can utilize to move forward.
Certainly. We'll definitely be monitoring this very closely, Premier, and we'll see how this unfolds. Thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. That's Panyaza Lesufi, the Gauteng Premier.